Virgil van Dijk back here. We know what happened the other night, Danny. Virgil and his Dutch colleagues went in against France, captained these days by Mbappe, and got a lesson handed out to them. A 4-0 defeat. And it wasn't the best night for Van Dijk, far from it, who, of course, was wearing the armband on the night. The great Marco van Basten on Van Dijk said he makes noise, but he doesn't say anything. He's not clear. A good captain thinks aloud, makes it clear what's going on. He stays in between it. He creates chaos. That leads to misunderstanding. This is Virgil van Dijk he's talking about. So, hardly glowing praise, far from it. He says he makes noise, but he says nothing. He says, you got to win at all costs. What do you think about Van Basten's comments here about Van Dijk? He's questioning his leadership capabilities, saying, should he have the armband?
Well, I don't think he's somebody you watch and immediately think, oh yeah, he's demanding of others and he's shouting and, kicking people up the backside, organising.
Do you need to be like that? You need to be a Roy Keane.
I think it helps with perception better in terms of people seeing leadership qualities that way. But a more trained eye would have to suggest that he is capable of leading and talking, because he always seems to benefit the defenders around him over the last 4 or 5 years who play alongside him at Liverpool, which is partly to do with him and talking. He's a calm character. He's not particularly aggressive in the way he defends. He's not somebody who likes fighting people in terms of going through the back of people and physically getting involved. He uses his brain, and he's a bit like that with his wording as well when you watch him play.
In your eyes, is he a leader though, Danny? Great player, yeah. The other night, none of them were. But is he a leader?
I'm not so sure he's a real leader. He's a brilliant footballer, but no, I mean...
Do you think he occupies the same sort of... I mean, I looked at him when he first came to Liverpool in the first couple of years that he was there. He was like a colossus.
Yeah.
And I look at him now, I watched him getting absolutely berated by James Milner when he didn't close the ball down against Jadon Sancho in that game against earlier.
I was there, yeah.
And he sort of shrugged his shoulders and meekly walked away. I mean, I do think that Marco van Basten does say things that are very strident and does come up with some ridiculous ideas himself on IFAB when he sat there asking for the offside rule to be removed. Yeah. But notwithstanding that, he was an elite footballer in the same way that Ruud Gullit was an elite footballer.
Yeah.
So they can call it out and see what it is. I'd like to see
Gullit's jumped on it as well.
That's what my point was. I'd like to see who they're suggesting should be the Dutch captain.
Well, that's a good point.
It's all well and good telling you what you don't want. But what do you want then? I think Virgil van Dijk is not the same player that he was 18 months, 2 years ago.
He set himself... Well, he had the year out, didn't he?
Yeah,
more or less.
after the Pickford interview.
Yeah. He set himself these ridiculously high standards where he was reaching levels that we'd rarely seen before by very few defenders. I mean, he, at one stage, the best defender in the world.
Yep.
And I think this season, or since he's come back, he hasn't quite been at that level. But let's not forget last season, after his injury, they still defensively were very good and nearly won all 4.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And deserves, so this narrative that he fell off because of the injury has never been the same. Last year he was nearly back to his best, if not nearly there.
But the Dutch didn't lose this game 4-0 because Virgil van Dijk didn't bark, be and bite all through the game. Is it?
It's not in his nature to be a John Terry type. Rio would bark. Rio would get after people. Rio was a proper, a leader, especially more on the eye. But Beckham was a brilliant leader without shouting at anyone. Just by the way, you don't have to have those qualities. But I understand the point.
Yeah.
Are you going to change him into that? No. By doing Van Basten coming out and making his observation, Van Dijk ain't going to start changing who he is.
I think Gulit's criticism is more constructive because he's kind of throwing down the gauntlet. He says, look, you're so big and you're so damn good.
Yeah.
This is a positive criticism we're giving here. Are you not the best? Well, if you are, show it.
Yeah, well, no, that's fair.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not asking him to be something he can't be, because his levels that he can reach are phenomenal. And when he falls below them, like any top player, you are going to get a bit of criticism.
I mean, you wore the armband on occasion. Your style was at Fulham?
Mixed. but I would encourage and volley, depending who I thought.
But if this isn't Virgil van Dijk's personality, it's slightly unfair to impose it upon him. The manager of Holland, who is it? Louis van Gaal still.
Of Holland, yes,
yeah.
Van Gaal's
right.
in charge.
So this is an experienced.
He knows
whose captain should and shouldn't be. So really and truly, what you should be doing is saying, if his personality isn't to lead and be demonstrative and be absolutely vociferous throughout the game, but he tends to lead by standards, right? His standards of play.
Yeah,
right?
training, whatever.
Right. So is there an argument being made here that his standards of play aren't good enough, but his captaincy is what it is? Because Louis van Gaal says you should be captain, right? A guy that's managed all the big clubs around the world and had many captains, I suspect, and many choices to make. So he thinks he's good enough to be captain. These two do not. I would suggest primarily for two reasons. His performance isn't operating at the same level and they've just got beat 4-0.
I would suggest that you're right in terms of talking about where's he at his performance level, but you're not going to change the character of someone.
And that's precisely my point.
There's no point even going there.
Well, it'll be imposter syndrome because he'll be doing something that he doesn't feel naturally. Roy Keane didn't need Alex Ferguson to wind him up to be his messenger. He just happened to be fortunate that once upon a time they were on the same page, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, but interestingly, you don't think he's a leader though. So
Well,
you're not that sure if he's a leader.
It's Ronald Koeman apparently.
There's Ronald Koeman in charge.
He's not an obvious leader.
Yeah.
But I think, in fact, Henderson's captain of Liverpool. Henderson's more of a leader. That's
when you look at the team that got beat 4 the other night by the French, should he have the armband ahead of Wijnaldum, ahead of Nathan Ake?
Yes.
Ahead of Memphis Depay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, when it comes down to it, there are not many takers, and those probably are the 3 most experienced.
When you break down the Dutch squad and you look at the players, he's the obvious candidate.
Yeah.
And he's won everything. So and he's very well thought of and respected as a good guy as well, and that helps because it means the other lads will go to him. So it's an obvious choice. If we go back to the original point, which is Van Basten's criticism and wanting more from him in a captain's role in terms of verbal and physical and all those things, then I think you're asking for something that doesn't happen. Somebody doesn't change in the late 20s. Their demeanour on the pitch. Part of his quality is his calmness and his class.
Sure. You would see, Danny, your beloved Liverpool played Celtic in a Charity Legends match the other night. One Stephen Gerrard played in it. Q Richard Keys from afar on Keys' blog, posted on his website. He says, if Gerrard still has ambitions to manage a coach in the Premier League, I really think he should be swerving Legends games. The likes of which we saw at Anfield last weekend. Gerrard needs to distance himself from Liverpool for a few years more yet. One of his biggest problems at Villa was that their fans largely saw him as Liverpool's captain. It was okay to start with. Gerrard said all the right things, but as time progressed and things weren't going well, it was an easy stick to beat him with.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view. I don't.
I mean, even when I think when he scored, there was a criticism that he had a bit of a taunt at the Celtic fans as well because they were having a dig at him about having managed.
I don't mind that so much. Bit of banter with the fans when you're playing in a charity game like that.
I think if anyone's going to play in a Liverpool Legends game, Steven Gerrard's name's probably the first on the list.
I don't think it matters because I don't think a potential employer and I don't think employees of the past would have judged him on playing in a charity game or not.
But he has a body of work now which questions his ability to manage at a
That's
level.
different though, isn't it?
Well, it's not, because you're talking about people employing him. I'm looking at Steven Gerrard. I want him long gone from the player that he was. I'm not interested in the player he was.
No, I know that.
It's
I agree.
Yeah. So he's playing in a Legends game, re-invoking images of what he once was, on the back of an Aston Villa failure, which had very little to do with the fact that he was perhaps associated with Liverpool, had everything to do with the fact he was clueless towards the end. That's the consequences of Steven Gerrard's performance at Aston Villa. So with that in mind, there's an element of what Richard's saying has some substance behind it. The other part I don't quite understand, because
the bit I think's got some substance is that the only bit is not so much that it's even Liverpool, but when I see a potential leader of my club, somebody who I want to have authority playing up football matches in his 40s, and
that's my point precisely.
It's a little bit.
That's my point precisely.
Come on, move on. Go and watch games. Go and be out there. Put across an image that's a little bit more sophisticated.
You've moved out of the pitch. You're moving into the area now where you can manage up and manage down.
Well, a few years back. I watched myself playing a charity match back, and I just thought, I'm not doing that again. It didn't just feel bad; it looked awful. I just thought, although it's for a good cause, I was just, you're trying to recreate something that wasn't. I don't do it anymore. But that's the
Masters Sixes was the time for that, wasn't it? When some of the ex-players played in that, I used to do that.
I've played in a few, and it's just sad to see.
It's when you struggle to get the socks on.
Yeah. But no, I don't think it's ideal. Look, each to their own. I don't know I don't think it's going to jeopardise future employment, but I do think you get to a point where you need to move on from.
Do you hear in the QT that he wants back in soon?
I think he'd love to get back in. Yeah. I just think it's a case of what opportunity is going to come his way, because it's not going to be Premier League, is it? Highly unlikely. So, does he go down the Scott Parker route and look for a bit more of a...
How'd that work out?
Yeah, unique challenge abroad, or does he try and get involved with the FA maybe?
Yeah.
The 21s has been talked about, depending on what Lee Carsley does. I don't know what the next chapter is, but there certainly will be one. But I do see the point of potential managers and leaders of big clubs, and somebody who's representing a huge football club going out and playing in charity games and getting involved in all that. I think if you're on that managerial path, just
be on it. Yeah.
Stay on it. All right. Don't be tempted to pull on the boots again. We're coming up to 12 noon this Wednesday lunchtime.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.